All right, I think we're going to get started here. Thank you everyone for coming. Our session on the future of energy management, ESG, decarbonization, and electrification. I'm Brad White, SES Consulting. I do low carbon buildings for a living. And it's funny, I was reflecting on the first time we did a session on this topic as part of the, at AHR, as part of the Automated Building Showcase. It was 2020, right before the pandemic, and I think there was 2 of us on the panel. It wasn't nearly as many people in the room. And all we were talking about was what was coming. The things we could see coming on the horizon, some of which we could foresee and obviously some that we didn't. But I can't help but look back in kind of amazement at how much has changed since 2020 in a lot of ways, but speaking specifically on this topic, I look at our own business. I used to describe us as an energy efficiency business. We did, our clients cared about saving energy, mostly to save money. Fast forward to now, and I'd say over the last 2 or 3 years, I'd say a good 75, maybe even more percent, 75% or more of our work is carbon focused. So our clients are first and foremost looking for carbon savings, and then kind of everything else that we do sort of falls back from that. From studies to design, implementation, commissioning, all of that. But the focus is entirely now on the carbon savings, and that's new. That's changed, and so we're seeing this kind of unprecedented flow of investment and incentives into this area. Building owners right now who are otherwise not that interested in spending money are willing to spend money on decarbonizing their buildings. At least some owners are. And I think I did a panel yesterday on sort of staffing in the industry, and one of our panelists, Skip, had some interesting statistics showing sort of what the projections were around the economic outlook for the next few months, and really predicting a slowdown overall in the commercial sector. But I can't help but contrast that with this sort of sub area of low carbon investment, which is just booming right now. But then I contrast that to all the buildings that we walk into, and as consultants we get often into these buildings where they've already spent a bunch of money on low carbon and it's not working. They've got $500,000 heat pumps that are sitting idle or tripped out, or just otherwise are not delivering the savings that they want to see. And most of the time, it's because somebody has messed up the controls. So we have these 2 things. We have sort of unprecedented investment and interest in low carbon, and we have the fact that none of it works without the building automation piece working well. And I think sometimes our industry doesn't realize how important we are to this low carbon transition, and conversely, what the opportunity in that is. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And if nothing else, I would like you to leave this session today with a sense that, this is important to my business, and there's opportunity here for me, even if ESG isn't something I've ever paid attention to, but owners are spending money on it, so it's a good thing to get your heads wrapped around for the sake of your business. So I'm going to throw it over to my panel now. I'm really excited to hear from all of them. I think I'm going to learn some things today too. So I'll let them each introduce themselves, and then we'll get to discussion. If you have questions, start thinking of them now, and we'll hopefully have a great discussion here this morning. So I'll start at the end there. Leon, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why you're here.
Hi everyone, I'm Leon. My background in this industry was I started out as an energy efficiency consultant. Before it was had a much cooler name, decarbonization. I wish I'd been a decarb consultant. Would look a lot better on my CV. So I started out obviously in Australia. Australia was the first country in the world to adopt a legislative performance standard. It's called NABERS. And I think that gives me a pretty unique perspective to add to this panel, because I think that's a really underlooked lever that is being applied to the market at the moment. Our market in Australia underwent a pretty tremendous change following that. NABERS was actually the reason why, I credit a lot of, I started a company called Bueno in 2013. And I credit NABERS to providing the environment and the market in Australia that enabled me to start Bueno. Prior to Bueno, my energy consulting experience, I was the sustainability lead for the property portfolio that won the number one most sustainable portfolio in the world under GRESB. When now, 10.5 years later, we're installed in 2,000 buildings across 9 different countries, and we have 1% of the whole of Australia's energy consumption on our platform, which is something we're very proud of in terms of the impact that we're able to have. But kind of looking back around, I think the unique perspective I've got to add to this panel is my experience having seen firsthand what building performance standards can do to the market, having gone through that industry.
I was saying, Leon's from the future, the future that I think North America is just now.
It actually is tomorrow in Australia, so that's great.
Thanks, Leon. Lauren, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. My name is Lauren Scott. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Sustainability for Acuity Brands Intelligent Spaces Group. If you're not familiar with Acuity Brands, we're the largest lighting and lighting controls company in North America. And more specifically, I represent the Intelligent Spaces Group, and so that's the software, sensors, and controls used to make buildings smarter, safer, and greener. You might be familiar, we have one of our brands out on the trade show floor, Distech Controls, with Atrius and most recently Key2. So I've been in marketing and communications for the past 16 years or so, but I've spent the better part of the past decade working in the clean tech space, specifically in building automation and renewables. I've also spent the past 6 years, on the board of directors of Sierra Club Canada, which is the largest environmental organization in North America. And I mention this because yesterday I was asked, as somebody who is super passionate about the environment, how did I end up in building automation? And I think part of that actually plays into how I ended up in marketing to begin with. Part of it is, unlike probably many of you, I barely passed physics and chemistry, but also I loved that marketing was this combination of business and psychology. And I really think our industry perfectly demonstrates that, in that, yes, as Brad was mentioning, there's an incredible amount of business opportunity on one side, but there's also a lot of psychology when it comes to talking about decarbonization. It can feel really challenging. A lot of people feel it very overwhelming. But I recently came across this theory, and it's called the hope theory. And hopefully, all of you guys can leave today really seeing how we are in the industry of hope. And the hope theory is that even when you're faced with a really challenging obstacle, like trying to figure out how to decarbonize the built space, hope is built on 3 things. First, you have to have goals. Those goals tend to be set either by our customers on their net zero journeys. It could also be regulatory goals. So you have to have the goals. Then you have to have pathways. I would argue that every single supplier out on the trade show floor is probably trying to show those pathways. So you have your goals, you have your pathways of how you're going to get there. For my company, it's really those software, sensors, and controls. And then the last piece of hope is agency. And so that's where you guys really come in, and it's informing your customers about how they can have an impact on decarbonization. So this is really kind of all of that to say that I think we're in that opportunity of both the business and psychology side, but we really are in the industry of hope, and that's how I ended up here.
Thanks, Lauren. That's great. All right, Stephanie.
I feel inspired. So, my name is Stephanie. I'm a senior decarbonization engineer. Yes, I do have the cool title. I work with SES Consulting, so I work with Brad actually, and I will echo a couple things that he mentioned. So I remember when I started about 5 years ago, all we did was energy efficiency, and I remember it being like a thing. It's like, oh my God, I'm so done with energy efficiency. I want to do something new and interesting. And now all we do is decarbonization, like complex, new designs, never been done before. It's just such a huge shift from 5 years ago to today. And we work with clients across all industries. And we work with a lot of clients with very different opinions. So there are some that are very ESG driven, like I don't care the cost, I want to decarbonize, this is, my goal, my target. And then we work with some that are like, I kind of don't really care, but this is good for business. And I think that's the piece that I want to drive home, is that it's not just for those of you who are like, I really, really care about the environment, though that's amazing. We have a client specifically who never had anything to do with decarbonization, wasn't planning on doing anything. And they had a tenant who was owned by a larger corporation who has these big ESG goals. And so the tenant was up for lease renewal. And they were like, we're not going to renew our lease unless you have a net zero plan, because this is really important to us. So, this client came to us and they're like, oh my gosh, we don't have a net zero plan. We need to have one in the next 8 months or this tenant is going to leave. So here we're helping them develop this net zero plan, which obviously they need to take actions to implement. It's not just a plan. And they're doing this to keep this excellent tenant. So we're seeing this come into play from more than just environmental. It's really becoming a business case. It's attracting tenants, it's maintaining the tenants, and it's addressing that carbon risk. Because actually, literally this morning on the bus, saw a LinkedIn post, and the city of Vancouver, I'm from Canada, promise I won't just talk about Canada, but the city of Vancouver is introducing emissions limits. And if you're going to be over them, there's going to be penalties. And I know New York, San Francisco, Washington, Boston, they're all doing this. And obviously Australia is, leading the way with these. But they've estimated that a typical business may see, $60,000 or more in annual carbon prices or carbon taxes if they're going to be over these emission limits. So we're starting to see this become really important in the business case of decarbonization. And that's a piece that, as we do our analysis, we include it. We're including carbon risk, we're including carbon tax, we're including this potential change to your asset value. But a lot of people aren't doing that yet. And so they see this decarbonization as a big cost. But actually, if you look at all of the pieces, it ends up often, not always, being a really excellent financial decision. So we're seeing this a lot in the market. And then just to touch briefly on the building automation system piece, as Brad said, we've been doing this for a long time, and we've seen projects succeed amazingly, and we have seen them fail miserably. And the piece in common there is the building automation piece. And it's really underlooked because it's like, I got this new fancy piece of equipment, it's so amazing, great, installed, done. But it doesn't work like that. I've seen heat pumps pump piped backwards. I've seen, the controls done wrong. I've seen all these pieces, and the industry is growing and learning. And clients are starting to get the picture. We've actually had a client that they would go low bid, always low bid. And so we kind of didn't work with them because we're not typically the low bid. But they've actually come to us recently because they had about 10 heat pump rooftop units with gas backup. They were supposed to be saving a lot of gas. They were in fact using the exact same amount, if not more. And so they were installed, they were never properly commissioned. And so here we're coming back in, and they don't have a building automation system. So it's not that you need a building automation system in every case, obviously. It's going to be building dependent, size dependent, complexity dependent. But, we're going in now, we're installing sensors, we're trying to do measurement and verification, we're trying to figure out what was going wrong. And so to have those sensors, to have that foresight, to have that commissioning as that really key component early on, clients are really starting to understand that. And I think that's where the building automation system comes in, because it's not this add-on, it's not this nice to have, it's absolutely critical. And there's really no point in installing a fancy low carbon technology if you're not going to commission it and control it properly.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks. And I've got a question for Leon before we take your question. So I want to get back to this idea of sort of, the fact that Australia has had this regulations in place for 10 years. And I know, I think Stephanie touched on Vancouver, Washington, Denver, there's a bunch of, it tends to be mostly at the city level right now, but there's sort of mandatory building performance requirements just starting here in North America. What happened in Australia after those? Because I know we're kind of there's sort of this natural aversion to regulation, I think. It's okay, well this is going to cost money, this is government overreach. What was it, how was this received in Australia? Kind of what happened immediately, and I guess looking back with sort of 10 years of experience, has it been a good thing? Has it just sort of tell us a little bit about that? Because I think I'm interested. I think probably the audience is too, to see okay, well, how does this ultimately play out?
I mean, it's been awesome for me. It's been awesome for Bueno. So I think that there is that commercial opportunity, really strong commercial opportunity that comes from building performance standards. Going to what Stephanie was saying about the importance of BMS. So one of the, I'll give you a bit of a, yeah, I mean, you want a history lesson about Australia? I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson about Australia. Well, Britain sent a bunch of convicts over to this country, and then we made this building performance standard.
You skipped a little bit.
Yeah. So in Australia, our building performance standard is called NABERS, the National Australian Built Environmental Rating System. It's not that daytime soap TV that we've exported, TV show that we've exported to the UK. It's a star-based rating system. When it was released, the 2.5 stars represent kind of an average building. And it's the kind of thing you have to go back and recertify every year. You know, you've got to prove the hours of operation of your building by lease contracts, prove the amount of occupied space, etc., etc., etc. It takes into account climate, normalizes it, and spits you out a rating to tell you how well your building has performed over the last 12 months. The beautiful thing about it is something that you have to continuously certify. So it's not a design-based rating system where you just put in certain materials, use certain design practices, and you get a rating and you keep it for the rest of the building's life. In fact, when I was an energy consultant, a lot of the buildings that we got brought into were the ones that had the 5-star design ratings, but the 0-star performance ratings. So it is a hugely powerful tool, and the importance for BMS can't be overstated. So one of the projects I worked on was a 5-year project to upgrade a portfolio from an average of 2.6 stars to 4.5-star portfolio rating, and literally half of that star rating improvement came from BMS sequence improvements. You know, just taking what was there, optimizing it, and making it perform better. So the importance of BMS is very, very huge to the success of buildings and achieving their building performance goals. Everyone in this room should be thinking about what that means for their business and how they can capitalize and capture a fair share of the value that they can potentially create for their clients out of this. The reason why NABERS in Australia took off was because back in 2007, the federal government, the biggest landlord in Australia, not the biggest tenant in Australia, said we're not moving into any new buildings unless they're at least 4.5 stars. So then you suddenly have environmental performance tied to core business rental income for these commercial landlords. Meanwhile, a bunch of other people followed suit. It kind of became this, vanity war where people want to be, 4.5 stars. You're doing 4.5 stars. I'm going to do 5 stars. And then all of the blue chip kind of corporates started kind of playing off that. They didn't want to be evaluated fairly, so it really kind of spread, and that was the first domino that fell. So it created a huge amount of opportunity. It created a huge amount of investment, particularly in the BMS space. It blows my mind when I walk into buildings here and they still got pneumatics, because I don't think I've seen a single pneumatic building in Australia in the last 15 years, But yeah, so going back around to what that means for the US is that building performance standards are now, even though they're being done at the city and state level, not at the national level, building performance standards are now legislated in cities and states that represent 25% of the population of the United States, and that's growing fast. So I think it'd be great, anyone feel free to reach out and talk to me, but it can create a huge amount of opportunity for people in the building automation space.
So the final death of pneumatics may come at the hands of building performance standards. Is that?
Let's see. It seems to be some kind of crazy zombie that you can't quite get rid of, but maybe this is the time. This is the headshot or whatever.
Okay. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, we're seeing something similar. So for district controls, for those of you who don't know, we have our office in Canada, but we also have our second office in France. And much like that rating system, it's not the star system, but it's more like the report card, and the exact same program in place has pushed technology that much further. So typically what we've seen, and this is full transparency within this room, is even as a manufacturer, we see those regulatory pushes in Europe pushing us as an entire organization, even though we're based in North America, that much further in terms of trying to achieve energy efficiency and that ultimate building performance.
That's right. Prompted me to get back to one of my talking points, but I really wanted to kind of get across to everyone was this isn't just a one and done kind of business opportunity. It creates these legislative programs create evergreen business opportunities for you all. We have clients in Australia that we're up to year 9 of working with them. And I was just looking, one of them, they're the biggest office building owner in Australia, and their year 9 savings on the buildings that we're on are $750,000, right? Let alone the years 1 through 9. So the savings and the value created out of this is pretty much evergreen, and then therefore the business opportunity is evergreen for all.
Yeah, maybe I'll just speak to that because I, am not from the future, but I have clients who are fearing this because they're coming into place in a lot of places that we do work. And I think what I would say in regards to that is I have a lot of clients right now who the way that they're treating this is very discreet. They look at their building every 5 years and then they kind of don't look at it in between. And they're missing so many opportunities. And I'm really excited for these building standards because I actually think it's going to save them money, because by looking at it continuously and catching things, you're then saving the money instantaneously. Like I have a client, for example, they have a big recovery chiller. They went through a recommissioning, they switched control providers, and then for a whole year, nobody looked at that building. I went in a year later, turns out they were using 3 times the gas for a whole year. They didn't catch it. So they have this big heat recovery chiller, it's not working, but now they're using 3 times the gas, so their costs are exponentially higher than they should be, and they have this big piece of equipment not working effectively. So, if we were monitoring it continuously as opposed to in discrete timelines every 5 years, every 2 years, whatever it is, we're catching those immediately, and that's where that $750,000 comes in. Because if we had caught that at month 1, we would have saved a lot more money. So, for the people who are maybe scared about that, I would say, I promise it will only save money, because looking at it in discrete chunks, the way we've been doing, is missing so much opportunity in the middle.
It's like avoiding going to the doctor because you think they're going to find.
Yeah.
Any questions right now? Okay, I have another one then. So we're talking about these building performance standards. Obviously, you need data on building, and you need to be able to measure and report on your building's performance to be able to respond to these standards. Like, I guess, what are some of the challenges around that? And I know, I've worked with a lot of owners who have struggled with that, but maybe, Lauren, do you want to just speak to some of the challenges that you're seeing, like among your customers that actually trying to get that information and report on it?
Yeah, sure. And one of our brands, Atrius, actually recently partnered with Smart Energy Decisions, a large publication, and we do an annual State of Corporate Sustainability. It's available if you want to read it. We had over close to 250 energy and sustainability specialists respond back. Just what kind of challenges are they facing on a regular basis? And the number one thing, actually, that you were just saying was the quality of data, just making sure that they can get access to that information. If you talk to a lot of people, like I also do a sustainability board organization. I've been deep in the weeds for a long time. For example, in spreadsheets of trying to calculate your emissions. So how great the quality is of your spreadsheets, especially if it's your intern who's trying to do it, is not always that valuable. So to try and find the tools that you can use for that measuring and monitoring is really, really key. Another piece is we do see labor shortages. I just kind of jokingly said ESG intern, but that's who a lot of companies are using right now. They're hiring somebody straight out of university who probably has the skill set to start pulling some of this information, but is not yet viewed as a strategic role within the organization. So we really need to lean on those tools that help to automate the different systems. And then the last piece is really funding. We need to be able to showcase that by putting these different programs and building automation in place, that there is a positive ROI. The reality is, even the most progressive organizations, and I do believe I work for one of them, if I go to the CEO and I try and propose a new sustainability plan, unless I can show an ROI within 3 years, it's scrapped. So you really need to be able to show a super fast turnaround on any investments you're doing.
Yeah, I'll echo that, because we've been working with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which, as some of you know, is kind of the benchmarking platform they're using across North America. So, if a company or a city is imposing mandatory benchmarking, a lot of the times they're using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And yesterday we were doing a talk and I was speaking on cybersecurity. And I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I had talked to a few people. And the first thing that a cybersecurity person will ask you is, what data do you have? What systems do you have? And it's surprising, like alarming to me, how often people don't know that. They don't, like I had a client be like, yeah, we have probably about 100 occupancy sensors in the building. They have 3. Like they have no concept of what their systems are. And that's the first place to start for reporting. That's the first place to start for energy management. That's, Leon can't do his job if he doesn't know what systems to control. So that's the first piece in a lot of places, and that for us has been the hardest piece for benchmarking. It's like, is your data accurate? Do you know what kind of systems are in your building? Do you know where they are? You know, those are the pieces that clients are really struggling with, because a lot of them, it's like, well, we don't really have an asset management plan. I'm pretty sure there's a paper down in the mechanical room. Oh, it's the wrong one. The chiller was replaced. Nobody decided to update that documentation, and actually water spilled on it, so you can't see. Like, it happens all the time. So I would say that data piece is the biggest impediment we're seeing right now. I don't know, Leon, like...
Yeah, it's still a huge challenge. Number one, getting on top of the data that you already have at a point in time, but then taking that and operationalizing the management of your data integrity is a challenge. And it's becoming even more important as organizations are having to rely on data that is in the buildings, that is connected to BMSs, and we're talking about submeters and that kind of thing, and then put it into their ESG reporting, which they need to have good governance over the quality of the data that they're reporting in some cases to the market publicly. As a kind of marker for the challenge, we've got a grocery client in Australia, and they've got 1,100 or whatever stores connected to our platform, about 1.7 million data points across refrigeration systems, lighting control, HVAC, all that kind of stuff. And without intervention and continuous management of data integrity, we would see the quality of that data set degrade by about 6% per year. So it's a lift to get it there, but that's when the real problem starts. You've got to maintain your data quality at a good level to continue to enable the reporting and decision making that you need to do with that data.
Well, it's interesting, this idea that, like, kind of back to this idea of regulation being scary in some cases. I think, what I've noticed is, like, the clients who are on top of their data are not scared of regulation, because, like, they've got the tools that they need to succeed. And, even if they're not meeting the targets, at least they know how to get there. But it's the ones who, haven't dug the manuals of the basement yet, are the ones who are kind of, a little more freaked out, because they don't have any idea where they are or what they need to do. So I think, even if the regulations haven't come yet, I think there's a lot of value in kind of getting ahead of that, because when they do come, the point is probably inevitable. Most jurisdictions are going to adopt some kind of building performance standards at some point, and you can be ready for it. I think helping your customers kind of get to that point, I think, is adding a lot of value to their organization, and you can start saving energy, obviously, right away. So I wanted to ask, kind of back to this idea that there may be a coming slowdown in the commercial sector, and I mean, a lot of owners are still struggling with occupancy rates. What do you think that a focus on ESG can do to help owners sort of get back to business as usual or attract tenants? Is this something you're kind of seeing as part of the owners you're working with, part of their strategies? Maybe Lauren, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I definitely, we go back to the ratings. I certainly think that there are certain buildings that will attract additional tenants, especially if those tenants then have their own emissions objectives. So you're going to be able to attract more people that way. But I do think it is an interesting time, and no one can really I don't have a crystal ball as to what the commercial real estate landscape is going to look like, but we know it's not going to go back to pre-2020 reality. It's never going to be full or empty. So schedules are going to be more and more complicated. We're seeing our customers are really looking for technology that's going to allow them to get more into the nuance as to how occupied the building is. So it's no longer just binary, people are in it or people are not in it. We need to be able to see how many people are in it, where are they in the space. So for example, we're introducing thermal sensors to be able to see, using AI, how many people are within the space, because it's not as simple as it was before 2020. So we're going to have to start collectively as an industry coming up with a technology to work within that gray zone, because it's never going to be going back to that pre-pandemic level.
Yeah, I think at the moment the pendulum has swung for the tenants to have all the leverage in their lease negotiations and to try to extract as much value as possible out of the landlords. And a lot of these tenants, like I said, they have some of their own ESG objectives that they have to report to. And the easiest way for them to say that they're doing something amazing environmentally is to get someone else to do it for them. And if they can put in their annual report that, oh, we just moved into this amazingly sustainable office space, then that ticks a box for them. And that is something that is, it sounds cynical, but it's of a lot of value to them.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, I teach a course on decarbonization and I talk a lot about asset value. And depending on where you look, which jurisdictions, which cities, the occupancy rates, the vacancy rates, there's a lot of gray zone around asset value. And I know a lot of companies are trying to determine like how green my building affect the asset value. So I won't comment exactly on how that'll work because if you look at articles, there's a lot of conflicting information right now. But what we are seeing is as vacancy rates increase, you know, if you have a choice between a green building that meets your requirements and one that is very high carbon, you're going to pick the green building. And, you know, there's starting to be banks that are going to have higher lending rates if you are very carbon intensive. You're going to not have access to certain loans. You are going to potentially have penalties. So there's a lot of pieces in there that it's going to allow building owners to set themselves apart if they are green. And if a recession comes, being able to set yourself apart is going to be really valuable.
The data is, I mean, sorry to keep going back to Australia.
It's
The
okay,
data
everyone's
is,
used to it, so yeah, tell us
the
about
data
it.
is, I feel like I got free pass. The data is very clear in Australia, which is a very mature market when it comes to building performance standards. That ratings of 5 stars above, which is, you know, highly sustainable, lead to somewhere between 4 to 7% increase in asset values for commercial properties.
Oh, see, the future has the numbers.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, and to add on to that, you know, one of conversations I've been having with some clients, and it's a whole new type of project that, you know, more than 2 years ago we never even heard of, but it's we're working now with more than one property investor who are eyeing the market of buying buildings that are not low carbon and basically flipping them. So they're going to, so as part of the purchase process, we're now doing these, we'll start calling zero carbon due diligence, which is basically very quick, like, how would you get this building to low carbon if you were to buy it, and, you know, how long would that take and how much money would that cost? And they're really looking at, you know, short term, 3 to 5 year, they would hold the asset, make investments in it to make it low carbon, and then offload it again. And as I said, there's more than one investor out there who thinks that this is a solid business model, which is really interesting because it's just not, I never even heard of that approach more than a couple of years ago. And you know, we had never been involved ever in the purchase of a building. Like, that just wasn't, you know, we come in and work with the operations team, and, you know, now I'm talking to, you know, the investment people in Toronto and trying to help them understand asset value and how much they're going to have to invest in low carbon. So there's been a real shift in that conversation, and it just feels like the people with money are wanting to spend money on this, and so immediately as a business owner, I'm thinking, wow, like there's opportunity in that for us, and adapting our services, and that's been really interesting because it's a whole new side of the business. But ultimately, it still goes back to the same fundamentals: making sure your control system works, making sure you've got equipment that will function properly, that you have a plan how you're going to maintain it and track performance, and so it's all there, it's all the same stuff, but in a whole new context. And that's really interesting to see how that's started to kind of repackage itself in the industry. I don't know if has anyone seen anything similar to that in sort of your work? Or?
Well, I actually think it goes back to what Stephanie was saying, that those companies that have the financial resources to proactively be doing this right now also have the people on staff saying these regulations are coming, they're doing the industry research, they know that this is proactively saving them money, because in the future they're going to be paying penalties if they're not investing in the correct systems right now. So there's a reason why, as those large organizations, they have the people on staff to be doing the research, to know this is coming, and so it is really more proactive, even in economic uncertain times. It's the smart investment for, I wouldn't even call it long-term, I would say mid-term planning. And
I guess, Lauren, are you seeing, whether Distech or some of your other brands, like, are you actually seeing your sales driven by owners like this? Like, are you, you know, to put a bottom line, are you selling more product because of owners who are kind of getting it?
Well, things are going very well. We are a publicly traded company, but no, in all honesty, there's a deeper interest. I think, you know, I've been with the company for, it's going to be 11 years this year. I used to be the person who was the I was called the tree hugger in the organization, but there's a real business case now to be more environmentally conscious, and I think our customers are coming to us, whatever their beliefs are around the current situation, they are interested in what this means for their business. What I would say is really changing, however, is we are a supplier. So for large organizations, we are feeling now significant pressure for certain large end customers. On our own side, we can't just sell products that help with sustainability. We have to be sustainable in terms of our operations. So for example, in Europe, and this is where we see more pressure, we have certain end customers who use a tool. If you guys want to research this, this is actually probably the extreme of what's coming, but it's called EcoVadis. And EcoVadis is a ranking system or a rating system for suppliers. So this large end customer will ask all of their suppliers, including us, to input all of our information in terms of ESG, largely emphasizing the environmental side. You get a score. At the end of the year, they said, we are choosing you can only be a preferred supplier if you meet this minimum score. But what they're doing is every year, they're bumping that minimum score up. So as a supplier, if you're not meeting that criteria, you can actually slip off. And they have no problem with it. They're a large enough organization to put that kind of pressure. And that actually where, now I'm speaking and walking around the trade show floor, some of the large players in the BMS space are now actually leveraging EcoVadis. So maybe that's a quick takeaway. If you do want to research that, it's an opportunity. It's one of those things, not Australia, but starting in Europe, that is probably going to start shaping some of the decision-making for suppliers here as well.
Thanks. And I guess you ever kind of get back to this idea of opportunity. I mean, Leon, you just moved to New York. Why did you move to New York?
I mean, it's a huge market. It's a huge market. The commercial property market in New York City is like 6 times bigger than the whole of Australia. So it's a big market, but it's a big market that also has a good performance standard in place. So we see the kind of fund local 107. Again, I don't know if people are familiar, but again, it's one of those.
And specifically a carbon-focused standard.
Yeah, and the minimum performance of it ratchets up every year as well. So it's something that we expect. That we think the fundamentals are in place for that to be a really, really strong market. But we go around and talk to people, and everyone does have challenges of owners putting downwards pressure on OPEX budgets. Coming back and asking for smaller service contracts and that kind of thing. Where people have found a lot of success is in retooling the makeup of what they're delivering as part of their service contract, delivering some analytics and FDD as part of their delivery to their end client, just as part of their bill of materials on their service contract. What they've kind of figured out, deliver the same size contract, 20% less technician hours, hell of a lot more perceived value to the owner because it's something that is continuously monitoring their building and also delivering energy savings. So even in a market that isn't going so well, there is an opportunity to kind of repackage what you're already selling your clients to protect your revenue retention with them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I keep coming back to these new business models that keep coming up out of this, and I think it's it seems like those that are able to adapt their business and repackage maybe what they're even already doing, just call it something different, put it in a different format, make it a subscription instead of a one-off, right?
And it's pretty attractive. There's a huge amount of pressure on the labour market for technical resources in the HVAC space. So it's hugely attractive to BAS vendors out there, BAS services businesses, to be able to do, say, 20% more services revenue, but keep the same kind of technician base. So there's a lot of pluses to taking that kind of approach.
Yeah, we had a discussion yesterday about staffing and how there just aren't enough people in this industry, and I for one would be very happy for fault detection to take like 40% of my job. So that would be wonderful, and I definitely think that's the way we're headed. So excellent.
Great, we've got a couple minutes left. Just
Sorry, kind of a burning question. We talk a lot about reports and reporting, specifically ESG, decarbonization. But on the operations side, we have dashboards. So my question is, with dashboards and APIs that can plug into specific dashboards, what are kind of the key components that you see providing the most value, and then who would be looking at those, and what are they using those dashboards for? Like what major category of a customer, whether it's president of the company, ESG officer, like facilities manager, what are the kind of key things that those people need on the dashboard?
I can speak very quickly on this from a dashboard standpoint. I do see dashboards having a really deep value. It tends to be a very digestible way to approach a more complex topic. So if you can get the right information onto those dashboards, you can go and get, we talked, for example, with the labor shortage, for example, it's going to help you possibly retain your associates if they see what kind of efforts you're doing within your building. It can also really help more digestibly pass it from that ESG intern I was talking about all the way up to your C-suite so that your entire organization can understand what you're doing. It's not just the person who is deep in the weeds in terms of either the spreadsheet or the technology. I would say, given the current context that everyone is starting to talk about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, I do view that as being key information that's communicated on those dashboards. And I wouldn't take it for granted that everybody understands what each of those 3 scopes are. So maybe have a section that is just purely descriptive and then do a deeper dive to be able to showcase where your organization is, how you're trending, and then what your objectives are. So for example, if you do have a 2030 net zero target, where you are on that journey.
Yeah, the main dashboards, it all comes down to the use case. And a good use case for dashboards is if someone has to make a regular decision and they need to get access to up-to-date information, you know, you kind of like, yeah, I've got to kind of massage the right kind of technological solution to what the use case is. But dashboards certainly, you know, provide a lot of value given the right use case.
There's also a lot of terrible dashboards out there.
But dashboards are just, I mean, people will get very excited about dashboards because it's a way to visualize data, but there's a lot more that you can do with data than just dashboarding. Right?
Yeah, we're developing an EIMS system for a client right now, and there's a lot of different people who want to look at it for different reasons. So, you know, for the sustainability manager, we're developing a dashboard that basically says, like, here's your target, here's where you are, here's how you're performing. Like, it's very simplified. And then for the operators, it's obviously much more complex. It's, you know, here's your demand daily, here's your alarms, here's your everything. So I would recommend that you address it, you know, ask each person what they want, because the more you can engage them, especially the operators, the more likely they are to be on your team. And if you can make things easier for them, so it's like 3 of these rooms have complaints, their temperatures are too low, you know, if it saves them time, they're gonna love it. If it makes it harder, they're gonna fight you. So just, yeah, dashboards are kind of, I would customize them for the different levels.
And that's very easy to do nowadays with the kind of enterprise BI tools that are out there, like Lucas Studio and Power BI and that kind of thing. It's very, like, delivering something bespoke for someone is not a very heavy lift nowadays.
So it's never going to be one size fits all custom dashboards for each specific role.
Yeah, absolutely, because, you know, my sustainability manager in this case, like, she's going to look at that, she's going to be super overwhelmed, she doesn't need all that data, it's not helpful. And the operator obviously doesn't need to see what she needs to see. The operators don't care how we're doing as far as our sustainability goals, but they do care that 5 rooms are unhappy, right? So it's very important to customize based on the needs.
I think that's some of the mistakes that have been made in the past is that one dashboard to rule them all, and it doesn't fit anybody.
I would say that it does have the need to be able to pull all of your data together, because maybe your dashboards will be different. You might have 4 different screens with 4 different dashboards, but if you're centralizing your data, you don't need to do that process 4 different times. So I would say that centralization is key.
All right, we're at time. I know there's a couple questions out there. I think everyone can probably stick around for a few minutes, but unfortunately we have to make room for the next session. Thank you all very much for coming. There's a QR code on there. That will take you to the landing page for this session. Be some resources there, also recording of this session eventually if you want to look back on any of the discussion that happened. Once again, thank you very much for coming. Please come back at 11 o'clock. There'll be, what's the next session? Is on driving forces of change for smarter buildings. Right? It sounds like a good session. So yeah, please come back and